Most of us have gotten the impression or have been taught that sex is just supposed to work and be easy. You just close the door, shut off the lights, and it just works, right? It doesn't just work, and it's okay that we have to learn how to make it work. Just like it's okay that we have to be taught how to drive, that we don't all come out as master chefs. For most folks, there's no internal dialogue of I should just know how to cook, right? And yet we expect that because sex is something that our bodies do naturally, which by the way, they sleep and they digest naturally too, but we still learn about those things, that we can't apply that same template onto sex and sexuality.
Caitlin V is a sexologist, an educator, a coach, and author focused on helping people build greater confidence, connection, and satisfaction in their sex lives. Her new book, Harder, Better, Longer, Stronger, is an evidence-based guide for men who want to improve sexual confidence, reduce performance pressure, and build stronger intimacy and connection.
We have today put more weight and expectation onto our romantic partners than people of previous generations. So our romantic partner is not just supposed to be the person that we raise children with or build a life with, but they're also supposed to be a best friend. We often are mistaken in thinking that we're the only ones that are dealing with this, or our challenges are unique, when actually they're very common. And we lead to people thinking that it's maybe them or their individual relationship that is the problem, it's not true. And these things are highly workable, highly navigable.
Solvable,
yeah, but we actually have to be willing to do the work to do it. And I always tell people, you're going to be the same person in your next relationship. So consider if it is really this relationship that isn't working, or if there's something that you want to really examine internally first. Whether or not you end your 20-year marriage is secondary to what can you as an individual grow from this experience.
She's also the host of Good Sex, a television series in which she works with couples on intimacy and sexual challenges, and she has built a large digital audience through her educational content around relationships, communication, pleasure, and sexual well-being. Please join me in welcoming Caitlin V to the show. Hi everyone, it's Dr. Taz. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to pause and say thank you. Your messages, your shares, your stories are the reason we make Whole Plus. Every conversation here is about connecting the science, the intuition, and everyday life together so you can feel more like yourself again. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe or follow button. It helps us reach more people who need this. All right, let's begin. We have needed you on the show for a really long time, Caitlin, so we're glad you're here. I think that you have an area of expertise that people are either uncomfortable talking about or want to brush under the cover, or they're talking about it and kind of getting nowhere with it. So we're going to talk about sex on this episode. We're going to talk about men and women, but we're going to focus a little bit on men's health and what that means for them, because for them and for us too, it's a vital sign and something to really pay attention to. And, as many conversations as I've had around health, I don't think I've had that many around sex. So this is probably long overdue, right?
Well, I'm honored to be the person.
Yes,
Thank
you are the person.
me.
You are the chosen person to guide us through this whole terrain here. All right, so I am, in my early 50s, and I've had some time, right, and some mileage to really observe patients and their relationships, my own relationship, those of my friends. And there's been a lot of ebbing and flowing is probably the best way to describe it, right? We've watched so many people around us get divorced. We've watched, relationships turn in a different direction. We've seen people battle all kinds of, conditions, whether they're physical or mental or whatever it might be. And so it's interesting as people continue to talk about things like marriage and relationships, and even if they want to be in one, you know, how this idea of sex and intimacy plays into the relationship. Because, a lot of the chatter that I'm hearing for the younger generation that's watching the older generations, aka me and, my peers, is that, well, all these people are getting divorced. So what's the point of being in a committed relationship? I can just have sex with whoever, whenever I want to, and that's the end of the story. So I'm really curious from the work that you've done. And I promise we will talk about men, but I'm just curious, when we first think about family and we think about, the health of a family. I've been spending a lot of time in my head, by the way, thinking about something called the family body, or what is the health of the entire unit, right? When we think about that, intimacy is important because a lack of intimacy often leads to disconnection or to, maybe even to other behaviors. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know what the research says. So help fill us in on what's going on some of these relationships that have existed for a long period of time, right? They're passing, the 2 year mark and then the 5 year mark and then the 7 year mark. And now we're into year 20. And,
Hmm.
and in fact, I was joking with somebody. It was like, the more I observe and look around, our marriage is really only supposed to last for 20 years and then you're out. Like, is that what's happening? Because that's the phase of life that we're in right now where our children are like 17 and 18 and you're just seeing like it's almost like a battlefield, like
Hmm.
all these like, yeah, like we're gonna go our separate ways. And it's
Hmm.
kind of this like 20-ish year scenario going on. So help us with understanding what's happening there.
Big loaded question. There's so
Yes.
much to unpack there because
I know.
I
I've
think
I've I overdid it there,
no, that was
but
great.
go wherever you wanna go
We'll
with
touch on
that.
all of it,
So,
but
yeah.
the if you just watch the news,
Yeah.
social media, like population
Right.
level, what's going on, it feels extremely fraught right now
Right.
on every level, every generation. The people who are growing up now, who are in their early 20s, are reporting having less sex than
Right?
any previous generation. The
What's up
number
with that?
of men and women who have not had sex in the last year is gone up significantly. I think there's so many factors too. I mean, you touched on some of it, right?
Yeah.
Which is this sort of sense of hopelessness around long-term commitment and marriage, these things that were maybe promised that most of us assumed that we would experience in our life, and we're seeing those uh, uh, that we're seeing that those things not happen and
Right.
not be able to withstand time for the people who are older. And then for the folks who are younger, they're also inundated with expectations that they've been fed on social media. They're living through the age of dating apps, and they're
Mhm.
navigating the complexity of meeting people online, which human beings are not built to do,
Mm-mm.
right?
No.
Uh, and then they also have like other factors that are influencing them as well. Their alcohol drinking is down, for example. Like
Mhm.
that was a way that a lot of people of older generations, my generation included, like lowered inhibitions and
Right.
had early sexual
Right.
experiences. They lived through the pandemic. Their skills in terms of dating and flirting and feeling safe and comfortable and navigating rejection and
Yeah.
navigating these things. And then they have financial and economic concerns as well. So there are so many things stacked up against dating and relationships. But specifically for those folks who are maybe like 35 and older, or the folks who have had maybe a 20-year relationship, Esther Perel actually has this
Yeah.
phenomenal
Yeah.
theory on relationships, and she sort of says that you have three marriages over the course of your life. You have sort of like your youngest
Right.
first marriage, where you have young children and you navigate that. You also have like young love, and
Yeah.
your hormones are different during that time. Then you have your second marriage, where your children are maturing and becoming adults, and maybe like getting ready to leave the nest. And then you have
Mhm.
your last marriage, which is after your children have left the nest, and you're more mature in what you want and what you desire. And some people have all three marriages with the same person.
Mm.
Some have three different, and it doesn't mean that you're legally married, right? Some
Right.
folks have multiple significant relationships, sometimes two that vary those spans. But I think that's a helpful framework to
Right.
examine what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that on top of all of this, we have today put more weight and expectation onto our romantic partners than people of previous generations. So our romantic partner is not just supposed to be the person that we raise children with or build a life with, but they're also supposed to be a best friend, our primary social contact.
Mhm.
We're supposed to have hot and spicy and passionate sex over the course of decades, even though no one
Mhm.
taught us how to do that
Right.
and what our expectations would be. And
Right.
because across the board we don't have really nuanced conversations about sex and sexuality, both with our immediate peers and as on a population level,
Right.
then we often are mistaken in thinking that we're the only ones that are dealing with this, or our
Mm.
challenges are unique, when actually they're they're very common,
Mm.
but we lack the language and the education for how to navigate them as they come up. So you have the combination of expectations that can't be met, a lack of awareness, and a lack of situational awareness regarding like how common the challenges that we're facing are. And we lead to people thinking that it's like maybe them or their individual relationship that is the problem,
Is that
or and
true?
it,
Yeah.
it's not true. And these things are
Mm.
like highly workable, highly navigable.
Solvable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we actually have to be willing to do the work to do it. And I always tell people, you're going to be the same person in your next relationship. So consider if it is really this relationship that isn't working, or if there's something that like you want to really examine internally first. Whether or not you end your 20-year marriage
Right.
is secondary to what can you as an individual grow from this experience.
Well, what are we missing? Like what are folks missing in the, course of a marriage or in the course of any relationship, right? As time goes on. We know that that initial passionate flare is like 2 years or
Hmm.
so, right? Is that
Hmm.
right? Is
Yeah,
that what the
yeah. I mean,
science says?
that's what
It's
our
about 2 years. Our
biology.
biology is like two
Yeah.
years. And then after 2 years, maybe it settles a bit,
Well,
right?
there's three important drop-offs.
Okay.
There's around 2 years, around 4 years, and around 7, 8 years.
Okay, so the 7-year thing is a
The
thing.
7-year thing is a thing. Well,
Oh,
and it
wow.
is because if you think about it evolutionarily, the best thing that could happen for our species, for our
Right.
DNA, is that it remixes as many times as possible, right? Because
Okay.
you have one child with one person, that's one unique set of combination of factors.
Right.
But if you have two children with two different people, biologically as a species, like that generates more unique combinations. It's better for us. So we evolved more likely than not to mate with multiple people over the course of our lives. And now
Mm.
we live in a system that doesn't promote that.
Mhm.
And in fact, there's quite a bit of shame around that even
Right.
today.
Right.
And so we've built structures that don't support our sort of more
Natural
natural inclinations. And this
biology, yeah.
neither is right nor wrong. It's just a
Right.
matter of like understanding that we are working against our biology, staying in relationships for longer periods of time. We work against our biology all day, every day. I
Right.
was looking at screens until 11 p.m.
Right,
last night.
exactly.
My biology was screaming at
Right.
me like,
Right.
my
What are you
eyes
doing?
hurt, my back hurts. Why am I still
Yeah,
sitting here, right?
yeah.
So it's not that we can't do that. It's just
Right.
that if we're not, we know, I mean, today especially, like the impact of blue light
Right.
and these glasses that we can wear,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
but we don't do the same thing with sex and sexuality. So 2 years is about the time that it takes to find a person, mate with them, and raise a child to the point where they're not extremely dependent on both parents all the time, right? And so
Right.
there's a natural drop off internally around that time, just in our biochemistry.
Okay.
If we chose to have a second child with them, that drop off would happen around the 4-year mark, and then the final drop off happens around the 8-year mark. That is when our chemistry is no longer really supporting us
Uh-huh.
staying in this relationship in the way that we're familiar with it, in the way that I think we've been taught to expect it.
Mm.
And so after around the 8-year mark, we have to be really conscientious about the choices that we make in terms of staying in and stabilizing the relationship. And then adding on top of that, I think this is a really important factor. Most of us have gotten the impression or have been taught or just picked up by cultural osmosis that sex is just supposed to work and be easy, right? If you love
You have
someone,
chemistry.
if you're meant to be together,
Right. It's
then you just close the door, shut
right.
off the lights, and it just works,
Right.
right? It doesn't just work, and it's okay that we have to learn how to make it work and how to make that continue to be a rewarding part of our relationship. Just
Mm.
like it's okay that we have to be taught how to drive,
Mhm.
that we don't all come out as master chefs. We have
Right.
to consult recipe books,
Right.
right? But no one shames you for learning a new recipe. For most folks, there's
Right.
no like internal dialogue of like, I should just know how to cook,
Right.
right? And yet we expect that because sex is something that our bodies do naturally, which by the way, they sleep and they digest naturally too, but we still learn about those things,
Right.
that we can't apply that same template onto sex and sexuality.
What's happening? Okay, so you have the 8-year drop off, and then if you don't, it sounds like there's work, and we'll talk about work in just a minute, but if you're not doing the work or not aware,
Mhm.
maybe just not aware of what's happening, like what happens next? What's sort of like the
Mm.
evolution as you move forward into a decade of marriage or
Yeah.
2 decades of marriage? Like what's going on?
I mean, my own first marriage, first relationship lasted 8 years.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
inside of that, when we no longer have the internal state that is supportive of that relationship, I think it can become more difficult, which it wasn't in my situation, in my
Yeah.
relationship, to ignore the areas of like misalignment,
Yes.
value misalignment, lifestyle misalignment, the areas that like when we had sort of that internal chemistry going for us were a little easier to ignore. And
Mm.
then once that
Goes
shifted,
away.
yeah,
Yeah.
we had to
Yeah.
come to terms with the fact that like actually who we were 8 years ago when we met is not who we are today.
Yeah.
And our trajectories are very different. And
Mm.
in that instance, I was very fortunate. We didn't have children together. We
Mhm.
didn't own a home
Mhm.
together. We had 2
It's
cats, so we
simple.
each
Yeah.
took one. It was very, it was It was emotionally very difficult.
Right.
But in terms of unpeeling our like financial structures and things like that, that was a little easier. And we're able to maintain a friendship today. I'm great
It's
friends with my
amazing.
ex.
Yeah.
And that is because we worked really, really hard on
Yeah.
every single aspect of
Yeah.
our relationship. Couples counseling, therapy, like we did our individual work, we did our work together. And so at the end, we were able to say, you know what? We tried everything. It's not working. Each of us would be happier on our own,
Mm.
finding other partners. And so we
Mhm.
were able to split amicably. But we
Mhm.
were fortunate because I also understood what was happening. I think for a lot of folks, if you're not familiar with this, or you don't know, or you're navigating multiple things that are stacking up at once, like you're going through perimenopause or
Right.
menopause, like
Right.
he's going through his own shifts in his testosterone levels that start decreasing when a man in his 30s. Like there's a lot more to it than that, and it requires a lot of self-awareness and a lot of compassion, both for yourself and the other person, in order to navigate those changes with grace.
I want to pause here because I see this pattern all the time. People are doing the research, they're listening to the podcast, they're trying to take better care of themselves, and they still feel so stuck, especially when it comes to their health, their hormones, their stress, and even taking care of their families. That's why I created The Circle. The Circle is my private membership where we go deeper into these topics with real guidance, demos, live sessions, and a supportive community. If you want to try it, there's a 1-month trial available right now. You can learn more at wholeplus.co/circle. That's HOLPLUS.co/circle, or just click the link in the description below and use the code YouTube. Now let's continue the conversation. Well, I was telling you before we started how, when the hormone shift, which came out in 2023, I don't know, I went down a rabbit hole and I was looking at hormone shift timeframes and relationships and divorce rates. And there was a parallel between the two, right? It was like, that 7 year was right around kind of like early perimenopause. And then, I think the next peak in divorce rates I saw was right around year 14, 15 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I could be wrong, but that's when you're like into further menopause, probably perimenopause, probably going into menopause. And then the next one was kind of the year 2021, and that one was like when most people are in menopause. Men at the same time we're not talking about because they didn't have a cycle, but their
Mm-hmm.
testosterone levels are steadily declining through this. So they're hitting andropause right around 40, right? Sometimes a little bit
Mm-hmm.
earlier, and actually it's all shifting downwards now, but they're hitting andropause right around 40 or so. And then they're also very different at 50 than they are
Mm-hmm.
at 40. And that friction, and I remember thinking, we didn't have you at the time, but I remember being like, I bet there's a connection here
Mm-hmm.
between what's going on. So, tell us what's going on. I think with women, we understand the biology better.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk at least enough about what's happening with men. Can you clarify that piece of this puzzle for us? Like, what are men experiencing? It's very easy to the pattern I see over and over again is the shocked woman and the villain man,
Yeah.
right? Like the woman either shocked because there was an affair, shocked because somebody wants to leave, shocked because she had no clue X, Y, and Z was happening or that there was even anything wrong. And then the man just being like, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
So help us with what's going on with men and, what we need to understand a little bit better. And then the second follow-up question to that is, just as women, like how do we start asking the right questions?
Yeah. So men's experience in their own bodies and their shifts happen more linearly than
Mhm.
ours. Ours,
Ours
even
are
just
like,
yeah. Even during
yeah,
our
yeah,
fertile years, we're
yeah,
like
yeah.
we're always shifting. So
Right,
yes, it is a bigger shift, but we're
right,
also a little bit more familiar with expecting that our bodies are going to change because
right,
they already are changing all of the time.
right.
Men, that experience can be a lot more shocking because after puberty, they pretty much live in the same body and
Right.
feel about the
And
same.
I act the same too. No, I'm just
Obviously,
kidding.
like
I'm like
yeah,
kidding.
yeah, oh yeah. Well, like, and obviously, like illness
Yeah.
and life circumstances, events, grief,
Right.
loss, job changes, children, all impacts all of that. But still, for a man, average man, his experience is pretty consistent until it is suddenly
Not.
not, and it seems like all of a sudden they kind of wake up and are like, oh, things are different. And men, for the most part, we as a whole treat women's sexuality as complicated and
Mhm.
men's as straightforward and simple,
Right.
right? Which does a great disservice to both genders.
Mhm.
But for men in particular, the disservice there is that any sort of sexual dysfunction that they're dealing with, erectile dysfunction, delayed ejaculation, premature ejaculation, a loss of libido, they tend to see that as a singular issue with them that
Mm,
indicates that something is wrong with them because their sexuality is supposed to be straightforward, right? It's supposed
right,
to be easy. So
right.
if it's not working, it must be something that is wrong with you, even though that is not the case. And 30% of men deal with premature ejaculation. The best numbers that we have are that 40% of men in their 40s start to deal with erectile dysfunction, and it goes up from
Mm.
there. 50% their 50s, 60% their 60s,
Wow, those are
70% their
high
they're
numbers.
huge. No, they're like epidemic level numbers. If
Wow.
50% of men in their 50s had, testicular torsion or something, like we would
Right.
be really looking into that, right?
We'd be paying attention
And
to
on a
it.
population, steadily, the men's testosterone rates
It's going
are
down.
declining,
Right.
right, every
Yeah.
year. A man today at the age of 40 does not have as much testosterone on average as his father or his grandfather had at that same age. We don't
Right.
fully understand exactly what is causing that. There's a lot of environmental factors, plastics,
Right. Right.
hormone disruptors.
Cortisol, all
Yeah,
the
it could be. It's
things.
a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah.
There's no one singular
Right.
fix to that.
Right.
But what's happening also is that a lot of men are then seeking testosterone replacement therapy,
Yep.
which can be marvelous. It can be life changing for the men who need it. But a lot of prescribers are kind of like freewheeling with the
Yep.
testosterone. So a certain number of men show up in my office going, my testosterone is higher than it was when I was in puberty. I've hit like 1200, 1600. It's way
Eee.
too high. I'm having really
I have these conversations all the
disturbing
time. Yeah.
thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about cheating on my wife for the first time. I've never thought about that. I'm like terrified by what's going on internally. And so there's this like other
Yeah.
layer to navigate, right?
Yeah.
So I think as a whole, you're totally right in that the narrative tends to be shocked woman, villain, man.
Yeah.
Men need to, as a whole, become more responsible for understanding their bodies, for understanding their mental and emotional and relational aspects of sexuality and of their relationships, and being advocates for
Yeah.
themselves and for the intimacy of the relationship in a way that is safe and grounded and from a place of like leadership and not from a place of force or coercion or the things that we typically see,
Right.
men behaving badly in
Right.
media, right?
Right.
And for the female partners, the questions that we can be asking are like, how is it that we are sharing the responsibility for the intimacy of our relationship and allowing it to change and flex over time?
Mm.
Because one of the things that breaks our structures is that we are changing, right?
Yeah.
We're changing in that we're maturing, we're learning, we're growing, we become parents, we shift in our careers. Like we are constantly changing
Right.
inside and outside. And if we built a structure around our relationship that relies on it to look or function in a very specific and rigid way, then as we change, the structure is not capable of bending with us and
Mm.
bending around us. And the issue is that so much of this gets repressed. We don't bring it up until it feels like it's
Why are we
too
not bringing
late.
it up? Like, what's going on? Like, why are we not? Oh, let me back up for just a second before we get there. Like, what are the biggest like warning signs you see, that you would tell a man or a woman, that they're starting to go in danger zone when it comes to intimacy? What are some of the
Mm.
big warning signs for each?
I'd say that the biggest warning sign and the thing that I would warn everyone against is when you feel resentment
Mm-hmm.
towards your partner, which is sort of like the emotional buildup of feeling like things are not fair or balanced between you.
Mm.
Then that is an enormous red flag and it needs to be addressed immediately. Resentment is one of the greatest killers of libido and desire, and it ultimately is one of the key indicators that a relationship is headed in the wrong direction.
Ooh.
And there are things that lead, resentment doesn't come from nowhere,
Right.
right? It comes
Right.
from an ongoing pattern of
Right.
things and behaviors, thoughts,
Right.
beliefs, etc. But I would say that if you feel that, especially when it comes to your intimate life, it is something that should be urgently addressed. I think that it's very easy to sort of sweep these things under the rug. They're very uncomfortable. We don't want to put time aside to deal
Mm.
with them. And we also don't want to easily prioritize them and put time aside to like take care of them. I
What
mean,
are common resentments that you hear about in your work from both men and women?
I would say that uh, feeling that they all come down to not getting needs met. That's I would say is the single most common sort of like umbrella
Denominator,
of
yeah.
resentments. And it could
Okay.
be like, I want to be having more sex. I want to be having different sex. I want to be having sex that is more pleasurable for me and not
Yeah.
just pleasurable for one partner. I want to be putting time towards our sex and sexuality, and maybe my partner isn't into it.
Right.
There's also, for couples who have children, navigating the
All of
time
that. Yeah.
post children,
Yeah.
right? And having like grace and understanding. And also, we have a very limited definition of what sex is, right?
Yeah.
Even when we say that term, most people think of intercourse,
Right.
right?
Right.
And actually, if we are willing to like expand that very broadly and think about eroticism and think about all the ways that we can connect with another person, then it need not look just like that.
Yeah.
But again, if we're not exposing ourselves to those ideas, if we're not putting time aside to actually be intimate, like one of the like famous examples of a homework assignment that
Yeah.
sex therapists and coaches give to our
Right.
clients
Right.
is to schedule intimacy.
Yeah.
Right? Like 2 hours a week. And it's not intercourse time, right? It's intimate time. It's time to put the phones aside. Try not to, use it just to have conversations, but instead like be physically intimate, snuggle, take a bath together, trade massages, like engage in pillow talk about what you want and what's going on and what you're afraid of, and be vulnerable with one another. But so many people meet with
Don't do
so
that.
much resistance to
Yeah.
that. Like, what do you mean in this world where I'm working 40 or
Right.
80 hours a week
Right.
and the kids have soccer practice and I'd like to see my parents or my
Right.
well, they're still here, or, spend time with my neighbors or my friends, like my faith community, like where am I supposed to
So
get
it's
the extra
physical
hours
touch.
to do that?
It's physical touch, but not necessarily intercourse.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we miss out on that. But we, in order to like care for anything that we love that's going to be with us long term, it requires a bit of maintenance. We
Nurturing.
understand that our
Yeah.
bodies require maintenance. We understand that our homes require maintenance. But if we really want to have a great marriage, a great intimate life, a great sex life, then it does require regular maintenance. And it also requires vulnerable conversations. And vulnerable conversations are hard enough for folks to have
Right.
outside of the bedroom.
Right.
Right. And if we don't have a framework, or we're not regularly practicing sort of like clearing out the stuff that needs to be said, or when we maybe rightfully so think that our partner isn't going to be capable of hearing us or having that conversation, meeting us with a conversation, then, and we can't already do that around how we're raising our kids or paying our bills, then it's going to be way harder to have that around a subject matter that we ourselves maybe don't feel that confident discussing to begin with.
How, usually men get accused of not being willing to have vulnerable conversations. It's
Mhm.
usually not women.
Mhm.
Is that fair? Is that a fair statement, or you don't think that's fair?
You know, I encourage the men who come to me for coaching or are, commenting on my YouTube channel to say, like, look, chances are that your partner is leading the charge for the emotional health of your relationship. And they're willing to have those vulnerable conversations. Hey, that hurt my feelings. I didn't like how we handled that.
Right.
Like, please don't talk to my mom or my sister that way. Like,
Right.
we are usually the ones that are responsible for that. Doesn't mean we're always doing a great job with it,
Right.
right? But we're the
Right.
ones
trying.
we're trying. We're trying our best,
Yeah.
and we're doing our best
Yeah.
with it. And so I'll say to the men that follow me, if sex really matters to you, if intimacy really matters to you, why don't you pick up that torch? Why don't you learn about it? Read my book, watch don't even read my stuff, read everybody's stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like, become a student of sex and sexuality, of eroticism, of intimacy. If you care about it, then take care of it, because
Yeah.
she's probably taking care of the sort of like emotional and familial load of the relationship.
Right.
So if
You
this
take care
matters
of
to you,
that. Yeah.
yeah, pick it up and run it.
I love that. So resentment's a red flag. Is there
Mhm.
another red flag?
I think that distance is another red flag. If you feel like crossing the divide between you, if the divide is growing more and more and more, that's another red flag. And it doesn't need to be it. I think when we're talking about any of these things, like all of them are things that we can approach with care. And as long as both people are interested
Are
in
you talking about
doing it,
emotional distance, not physical distance?
both.
Both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any kind, like distance
Okay.
of the feeling of like, I can't reach you. We're not spending quality time together. We're not looking at each other. We're
Yeah.
not putting our phones down. We're not going out to have special time, just the two of us.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a date every single Friday night, right?
Right.
But it could just be like, do I feel like I can reach you?
Right.
Right. John Gottman has done a lot of work around like the 4 horsemen of the
Yes.
apocalypse, right? And the things
Right.
that we look for in a relationship. But I would say that distance, one person being withholding, or, they use the term stonewalling. I like to think about withholding as like a sort of the precursor.
Yeah.
Withholding is done consciously, and stonewalling is often done unconsciously. Criticism, contempt, all of those things are red flags, yellow flags if you catch them early enough, but red flags that indicate that maybe it's time to do some work on this. And because it is a really sensitive subject, it might also be appropriate to call in a professional.
Yeah, I think that's always a good idea because people get defensive very quickly.
Yeah.
Let's flip it. Like, what are ways for a couple to reconnect that's
Mm.
starting to experience some of this fraying, so to speak?
Yeah.
How do they reconnect? How do they find their way back to each other? Is that possible?
Right. Well, and I say honestly, you don't have to be at a 5 alarm fire to start doing these things. Like,
Right.
any relationship will
Right.
benefit from these same tools, because it becomes preventative maintenance instead of like repair. Right. I think that the single most important thing that most people get wrong is we don't clean up as quickly as we need to when it comes to,
Something going wrong.
yeah, or like something didn't feel right about that and I didn't want to say anything, or we hide little things from each other, right? Like, I didn't really like how you touched me, or I was experiencing some pain, or I told you that I was staying late at the office, but like actually I had a couple drinks with the boys, or these little things that add up over time. And so we need to constantly be cleaning and repairing inside of our relationship the really, really small things before they grow into larger things, right? The
Interesting.
little miscommunications, the little missteps. And part of that is learning for ourselves how we can receive feedback
Yeah.
and not become defensive around it, right?
Right.
And not go straight to, well, like I had to, or I didn't mean to, or you're making too big of a deal out of it, or
Right.
like, we need to actually be able to learn how to receive those things with grace.
Right.
That's very difficult.
Right.
We need to be able to say them with grace too. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't like it when that happened, or I felt alone,
Right.
or I felt like um you were abandoning me at that dinner, and it didn't feel good when you started talking to her instead
Yeah.
of me, or something like
Yeah.
that, right?
Mhm.
We need to be able to speak those things clearly, and our partner needs to be able to hear them and make repair quickly. This is not sexy. It is foundational, it is important, but it is not sexy work, right? We also need to be engaged in, I think, an active process of acknowledging each other. When my ex-husband and I sort of first discussed splitting, we were around 6 years into our relationship, and we kept our relationship going for like 2 full years, practically running strictly on like acknowledgement, appreciation, gratitude, cleanup, and repair. And so we had this practice of asking, like, what's one thing that you want to be acknowledged for?
Mhm.
Because often, we talk about love languages, like, what I see as love might not be love to you, right?
Right.
The way that he's trying to show me love
Right.
isn't necessarily how I want to receive it. And so
Right.
we were able to get really clear on like what we were doing for each other that were attempts to care for the relationship, but were falling flat, right? So I'd say, like, oh, I want to be acknowledged for the fact that, like, I did your laundry, this act of service that I gave to you. And he might say, like, oh, I want to be acknowledged for the fact that, instead of taking time out to go see my friends, I prioritized having our date this week, when I might think that that's the bare minimum.
Right.
And so these little communication style tools can be
Yeah.
really effective at nipping things in the bud,
Yeah.
right, before they become bigger and bigger.
Do men and women disconnect for different reasons?
That is a great question.
And by disconnect, I mean, obviously lose interest in sex, you
Mhm.
know, start to withdraw from the term checked out. I'm sure
Mhm,
you've heard
mhm,
people
mhm.
say, like, what makes a man check out? What makes a woman check out?
Yeah, I mean, I think they ultimately are the same reasons, but they look different
Different?
in each gender. I would say that feeling unloved is
Mhm.
kind of the primary
For both.
cause for women in
Okay.
particular to check
Okay.
out, and feeling disrespected or not appreciated is more commonly the man's reason for checking out. But I think
Interesting.
that's more of an indication of just like how we receive and what we expect from each other. Ultimately, they have a very similar sort of thread. I think they feel similarly in each of our bodies,
Mhm.
but we label them very differently, right?
Hmm.
So for a woman, if we don't feel like we are being seen, appreciated, valued, loved, cared for, the things that we sort of
Nurtured.
expect, nurtured
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
our masculine partner, then that could be cause for us to check out, to withhold, to put up walls, to pull away our vulnerability.
Mm.
And for a man to feel criticized and not trusted, to feel put down,
Demeaned. Yeah.
demeaned, yeah,
Yeah.
all of which kind of fall more under the category of disrespected.
Mm.
Those are more of the causes that men check out. And I
Mhm.
think ultimately a lot of folks check out because they feel restricted in one way or another. Like, I'm not accepted the way that I am and appreciated for who I am. And you want me to be something different than who I am today. That's a very difficult feeling to be with, right? No
I
matter how
hear
much
that
you
a
love your
lot.
partner.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from women about men, like wanting men to be a particular way,
Hmm.
right? And men being like, no,
Yeah,
this,
and
you know,
and the
like,
other way
no,
around, right?
this is not who I am, and this is not who I want to be. And I have seen those relationships,
Yeah.
fall by the wayside for sure. What's the role of stress and cortisol and the burden, right? For women, I call it the invisible load because we're
Hmm.
always doing logistics and kind of carrying that, you mentioned it, like the emotional burden for the family, right? So there's that kind of chronic stressor that a lot of women talk to me about. I've experienced it myself.
Hmm.
And then for men, they may have other stressors, right? Like I feel like men put themselves under a lot of like caregiver stress or provider stress or
Hmm.
financial stress. What is the role of stress in disconnection and in intimacy?
Yeah, I mean, well, cortisol and testosterone have a inverse relationship. It's not like a one-to-one scale, so I'll
Mm-hmm.
be cautious about how much I say on that. But for the most part, men that are dealing with high levels of stress, high levels of cortisol, did I say cortisone earlier? Cortisol.
Cortisol.
Yeah,
Cortisone's related, so it's
cortisone is that.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
But men that are dealing with high levels of ongoing stress and cortisol have typically struggle with their testosterone more than men who don't.
Mm,
Testosterone is replenished in our sleep. And if they're not sleeping well, there's a whole cascade of
right.
factors that come out of
Right.
stress. But I've talked to so many men who say that their sexual challenges, dysfunctions, issues came forward when they no longer felt like they could provide, when financial
Yes.
insecurity entered
Yeah.
into their relationship. And that was the biggest and most challenging thing for them to navigate, right? And you're totally right. There's a lot of like provider stress. The truth is that we live in a very quickly changing world
Yeah.
where women no longer rely on men to
Right.
be their financial providers.
Right.
More women graduate from graduate
I
degrees,
know.
and we've worked really, really hard to have
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
And also, we have this changing landscape regarding like AI and more
Right.
traditional jobs, and women no longer need a man to get a mortgage or sign up for a credit card. So, what men need to provide in relationships has changed, but the way that men have been raised and taught about relationships has not caught up yet, right?
Mm,
So there is a little bit of a sense of, I think, uh, failure on men's part, and there is some
they're
like,
lost.
yeah, they're lost and they feel resentful and they feel like suddenly, it used to be enough, unfortunately, for your grandfather to just like put a roof over everyone's head and food on the table, and then like he get to like kick back and drink a beer, right? He
Right.
did not need to show up emotionally. He
Right.
did not need to have a value alignment and spiritual connection, and he didn't need to be a safe space for her to go to and have deeper conversations, and he didn't need to speak the language of
Yeah.
vulnerability. But that's not acceptable anymore for men. Women
Mm,
are not looking for men to just become to be the wallet for the family, essentially,
yeah.
right? Like, we can do that for ourselves. We still want men, right? We still want to have relationships with men. Overwhelmingly, women, even women who like have stopped dating or stopped engaging with men, for the most part, like they chose that after trying, after
Yeah.
putting significant effort into forming a relationship with a man, and only after repeated difficulties, failures, obstacles, challenges, did they decide that they weren't going to continue to pursue that and that they were going to be fine on their own, and they will be fine on their own, right? There's just a lot
I've got
of
to ask you this question. It's
yeah.
going to be so inappropriate, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So, can men really feel masculine given their biology if they are not providing
Mm.
and being kind of that financial safeguard? Because have we really evolved to the point? Have men had the opportunity of time and space to truly evolve to the point where they can be okay biologically? I'm not
Hmm.
talking about consciously and the decisions they make and the intellect and what you might read in a book. I'm talking about subconsciously. Are men even there yet where
Yeah.
they can feel safe and feel okay not being the financial
Mhm.
provider or breadwinner or whatever
Right.
word we want to use for
Yeah.
it, um, and still maintain their masculinity? Or is it sort of killing them on the inside and driving up cortisol and driving down testosterone?
Well, so both are true, but if we go back in time prior to the Industrial Revolution, the
Yeah,
expectation that men would leave the house for 8 to 10 hours a day
right,
in order to get a paycheck, in order to provide for their family. If we go back in time before that, which is the majority of all time, right?
right,
The way that men provided for their family was like through physical labor,
right.
often working a farm, growing food, hunting and killing, and providing actual literal protection for the family against physical threats and violence, often in the form of other men.
Right.
Most predominantly in the
Right.
form of other men.
Right.
And so, yes, absolutely, there are ways that men can go back and feel very grounded in their status as man, as protector, as, caretaker of the family when it comes to outside of the home. It's just that those spaces are shifting
Mm,
pretty significantly. So men can no longer look at leaving the house and earning a paycheck as the way to feel grounded in themselves and their masculinity. And they're also dealing with the fact that that might have been the only example that was ever demonstrated for them.
yeah.
That might be the only,
Right.
we're now,
Role
how
model.
many
Right.
generations deeply
Right.
past that point. We don't have any recent memories of
Right.
someone who provided for their family in any other way, right?
Right.
And because money is um, it sort of symbolizes talent and intelligence and capacity, right? Like we see in our culture today, the people who we see as most capable, most talented, most intelligent have the most money.
Right.
And whether that is actually true, it doesn't matter, because that is
That's just the way
that
it
is the
is.
way that
Right.
everything is
Right.
perceived today.
Right.
And so it takes an individual man the willingness to say that I'm not going to allow my masculinity to be defined by a paycheck,
Mm,
and instead I'm going to be defining my own masculinity for myself through my behaviors, through the way that I care for other people, through the way that I like move my body, through the way that I engage with other men, through the service that I provide, through giving my gifts to my community. There are so many routes to that, but it really does take a lot of courage, because it requires sort of dismantling so
mm.
much of what we've been taught to have it.
How can women help that situation, right? Like if you are a powerful woman, and we see this all the time, right? Like
Hmm.
powerful women seem to have trouble in a marriage situation frequently, right? If you're a powerful woman or, kind of driving the family from a financial standpoint, is there something women should be aware of
Hmm.
when they have that power and that responsibility?
Yeah, I think this is so important for us to discuss too, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of the uh, influencer, I mean, I don't know, everyone's algorithm is different, but I
Right.
see a lot of like, okay, if you're a powerful woman, then you need to become more feminine when you get home,
Right.
right? Like put down your sword and
Mask.
shield when
Yeah.
you get
Yeah.
home, and like. I relate to that. I run a company.
Yeah.
I am a powerful woman. Like
Yeah.
I was a financial provider for many years. Uh, I grew up in a house where my mother was the breadwinner,
Uh-huh.
and I saw it firsthand. So I feel very strongly that the ask should not be for women to um, become something that they are not, or somehow make themselves smaller
Smaller.
in
Right.
order to help their man feel bigger.
Right.
I don't think we're doing anyone a service when we do that. Now, that is not to say that it doesn't feel good to get out of your work clothes, put on a dress,
Yeah.
like throw on some makeup. Maybe if you love making food for your family and that helps you to sort of like put down
Yeah.
the stressors of the
Yeah.
work. And even if you don't work outside of the house, like existing out in the world, we have traffic. You can
Yeah.
almost get hit by a car.
Yeah.
Like
Totally.
there are stressors that are not explicitly work related, and you don't have to have girl boss energy in order to be dealing with.
Right.
But I like to think about it more in terms of how do you uplift and support your man into feeling into his bigness
Mhm.
in ways that don't require you to feel like you're becoming smaller.
Mm.
And some of that is Justin Patrick Pierce and London Angel Winters, I believe are their name, great thought leaders in this area. They've sort of taken the like masculine feminine polarity conversation and switched it into alpha and omega energy.
Mm.
And they give a great example, which is like if we're both in our alpha energy, which like my ex-husband and I, we ran a business together. So we were often both in our alpha energy. We were like getting it done,
Yep.
leading, taking charge,
Yep.
right? And then we would both switch into our omega energy, which is like, I don't know, you decide what do we want
Yeah.
to have for dinner? What do we
Right.
want to watch on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Like both of us are in that space. So the question is not like should one person based on their gender or their genitals
Switch.
constantly be in one role or
Right.
the other.
Right.
It's like, how much fluidity do we have that we can switch between them? Because sometimes it's nice for me to be alpha and for him to play omega, or for me to be leader and him to play follower.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice to consciously switch those and he play leader and I play follower.
Right.
It's really more about the fact that there is that spark
yeah.
than that one person needs to be like artificially behaving in a way that's not authentic to them, because that's not sustainable.
Right.
You know, you're just pretending. That doesn't feel good.
Right.
And then when it doesn't work because it doesn't feel good or natural to anybody, then you're like, oh no, is our relationship further gone than we thought? Do I need to significantly change the way that I do things in the world? And the answer is no.
No. Where does like performance, right? The idea of performance, or, you know, how a man is going to be in the bedroom, like how does that impact intimacy? What's going on there?
Oh my gosh. I mean, that is the name of the game. That really is it.
Yeah.
If I could underline and bullet point like every single sexual challenge that men face, it pretty much comes down to performance in one way or another. And the expectation that we have collectively of men that they are going to want sex, be able to have sex, be able to know what their partner needs in sex, and that if they don't do any of those things all of the time, then they are failing. I mean, that is the definition of performance pressure. I have to show up and be a certain way and succeed in order to be loved, in order to be a man. And remember, masculinity is something that you have to like bake fresh every day, right?
Yeah.
You don't just like, you know, go through puberty and you're a man in the same way that like we become women. Men are constantly having to prove that they are men, right? You don't hear like anyone say woman up. I mean, maybe we hear that more nowadays, but like the phrase man up has a lot of meaning, right? Like man up, right? There is a way to perform masculinity and you need to do it. Or you can get gut checked. You can get checked by another man. You can get checked by a woman. You're not being a man. You're not man enough, right? All of these are ways that we remind men all of the time that they need to perform masculinity in a specific way in order to earn love, in order to earn their place like in society, right? And so all of that comes with them into the bedroom. And it comes with them into the bedroom with this like additional level of shame and an inability to discuss how common whatever it is that they're going through is. So those compound. And, you know, really, really well-meaning, intelligent, phenomenal men of character and of value are put in this position where they feel like something is broken if their performance isn't being executed in the way that it's supposed to be. And so they take that internally. And sometimes they do something about it, right? Like they seek help, they seek support, they read books, they go to coaching, they do this.
Right.
But a fair number of men who like are otherwise extremely successful and capable really internalize that and allow it almost to like rot and to become something that becomes a barrier between them and the people that they love.
And that becomes a bigger disconnection. And this is performance in terms of performance in the bedroom, or just performing as a male?
I mean, performing as a male, but specifically, it really impacts intimate relationships, and that's you know the area that I love focusing on for men. Is reframing and shifting their conversation around a performance-based model and into more of a pleasure-based model.
So maybe go into that just a little bit more, because if a man is listening today and is feeling that way, like just pressured, there's financial pressure, there's family pressure, there's, you know, whatever is going on with them. There could be medical pressure, right? Like there's biology that is changing for many men. And I would put that plug in of make sure, you know, you understand where your hormones are and get those hormones checked and understand where your cortisol is. I mean, I had this conversation with my husband who's, you know, dealing with, you know, his own hormone shifting and cholesterol shifting. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything until the cortisol is better, because the cortisol was through the roof, you know? And so I think, you know, really understanding your biology is probably just as important for men as it is for women. We tell women all the time to understand their hormones. So men too need to do that. But, you know, in addition to that, like what can we help them with in terms of a toolbox if they're feeling this way? Like if we gave them 3 things to do, what would you tell them to do? Homework. Homework time.
From a partner's perspective.
Directly to men. Directly to men. And then yes, you know, from a partner's perspective. What's the homework for everyone?
So I typically start with the physical body, but you covered that, right?
Yeah.
Women are far more likely to go to get
Right.
their typical health screenings. They're far more likely to do deeper dives into their
Right.
health. So,
Yes.
I like to say to men, like, if you won't do it for your sex life, what will you do it for?
Right.
Right? You maybe don't want to get screened to find out that you're pre-diabetic. I get it. That can be
Yeah.
very scary. I
Yeah.
still think you should do it. Just
Right.
get over
There's a
it.
lot
But
of that. Can you
there's
help me with
so
that?
much of that.
Like, they're so scared to come and they so want to game the system. They're like,
Mm,
well, I wasn't going to come because X, Y, and Z happened. I knew my A1C would be off and I knew my lipids would
right.
be off. So I was going to wait 90 more days
Right.
and then come.
Well, I think all of that really does also come down to performer. Like, there's something broken about me if I'm not
Mm. Yeah.
healthy,
Yeah.
then I have to face all these other truths. And
Right.
I'm strong and I'm tough and I've been
I know
taught how
better.
to do this. So
Yeah.
I can't, again, it's like,
Yeah.
if it doesn't mean you're broken,
Yeah.
period, and the sooner that you get in, the better that your results are going to be, almost universally, right? Like, prevention
And
is
you'll
the
be on a
best medicine.
path, like an efficient path for you instead of
Yeah.
swimming in like, well, I know I need to eat better and move more. You know what I mean? Like there may be something you're missing,
Totally.
that's basic
Yeah,
biology,
I mean,
so
it comes down to that same trope of, like, men not wanting to ask for directions,
right.
right? Like, I mean, if
Yes.
men are supposed to always know
Yeah.
what's going on and what to do next, and we put so much pressure on men to know what
Right.
they're supposed to do all of the
Right.
time, in and out of the bedroom, then, like, it stands to reason that
Right.
they would not go in and seek the advice of any kind of
Right.
professional, because, like, they're
Right.
supposed to know what to do.
Right.
So drop that nonsense. Like, go
ASAP.
get your physical health
Yeah.
looked at first, and then I typically go to um, mental and then, like, emotional well-being, right?
Okay.
So mental means checking in on the stories that you tell yourself, the narratives, the things that you believe are true. This is one of the things that I learned really early on in coaching with men, is that they would come in and they'd be like, well, I'm a realist and I'm very logical, therefore all of these things are true. And I would say, okay, let's, maybe we have different definitions of truth, but all of those things seem like highly anecdotal, and you just experienced them once and you took it like all women are like that, all relationships are like this. And
Mhm.
so I would help them to, like, unexamine, or to unpack and examine where those thoughts and beliefs
Right.
that they're, like, really, there's so much conviction around them. And it is scary to, like, begin to let go and loosen up on your world beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Because we believe that we built our scaffolding,
Yeah.
the thing that holds us up in life or holds our relationship up, right? It's, like, built on these beliefs. What would it mean if I began to loosen them up and let them go? Well, it probably would mean that you lived a happier and healthier
Mm.
life. And that's the thing that might stand on the other side of confronting those things. It's not like a singular piece of homework, but more like
But the
a
narrative,
mindset
the
shift.
stories you tell yourself,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
And fortunately, starting with the mind is a lot easier for men than going maybe through, like, the emotions or
mhm.
relationship or communication or the even spiritual entry points, because we can all get that our mindset impacts our well-being in our lives, period.
Mm.
Right.
Mhm.
And it impacts what we expect from other people and how we treat other people. And so I would say begin with a thorough examination of your mindset and beliefs around sex, around women, around partnership, around yourself, around masculinity. No
Mm.
small task.
Yeah.
But certainly the results that you will get from a thorough exploration and reflection will create the foundation upon which everything else can rest, right? I also say it always starts with you. Your sexuality starts with you. It's not something that your partner owes you. It's not something that your partner or your relationship creates. It predates them.
Hmm.
It's something that has existed even before you went through puberty. It was different then, but your sexuality will be with you until you take your final breath. It is not made by another person. It is not for another person. And so when we examine our own sexuality from our own perspective,
Right.
that can be truly revelatory as well. And I would give that to both men and women, right?
Hmm.
So much of us are raised and conditioned to believe that sex is bad, dirty, shameful.
Right.
Only do it with one
One
person
person.
that you're
Right.
married to under these really specific
Right.
circumstances. But the truth is, underneath it all, that's not who we are. That's not how we evolved. We can have any relationship with sexuality that we want, but it has to be grounded in our own reality, right?
Mm. Mhm.
And then for men especially, I would say to develop a practice or some kind of relationship to your emotions.
Hmm.
So often we discuss emotions as if they are in the wheelhouse of women
Right.
and not at all in the wheelhouse of men,
Right.
right?
Uh-huh.
But, like, often men filter all of their emotions through a handful of emotions that are, socially acceptable. Anger is an emotion, right?
Yep.
So if you have outbursts, if you experience anger, or you experience shutdown, if you experience sadness, if you experience going internal, if you experience numbness, all of these are emotions.
Hmm.
You have an emotional landscape, whether you like it or not. Boy babies and boy toddlers cry in the same way that girl babies and girl toddlers do. We are not different in this
Right.
way. It's just that we've been conditioned differently, right? And so when men repress or suppress their emotional landscape, they create sort of like these like emotional volcanoes, like hotspots
Mm-hmm.
where emotions tend to flare up and
Yep.
come out. But they also then are less practiced when other emotions come through. Like we're all going to lose people that we love, right? If we're fortunate enough to live a long life, we will lose things, people, animals,
Right.
homes, jobs, like
Right.
things that are important to us. And if you don't have a skill set that allows you to process things like grief, then you also don't have a skill set that's going to allow you to like really dive in and experience the heights of joy and happiness and satisfaction. Your emotions are not, you can't suppress one and allow for another, right?
Yeah.
You can't keep sadness at bay but experience joy all day. That not
Right.
in a real way, right? Like
Right.
there are certainly people who pretend that they can, but that is not reality, right? And having a relationship with your emotions and knowing what's going on internally, how to express them, how to talk about them, that's not weakness. That's
Mm-hmm.
actually they're fuel, right? The spike that you feel when you have emotions that like draw you to do things, that cause you to take action, like you can either have that working for you or you can have that working against you.
Mm.
And so I would say if you start anywhere, start with your physical body, examine your mental landscape, and then develop some kind of a relationship with your emotions
Hmm.
that empowers you instead of disempowering you.
And all of that is additive and cumulative to your ability to experience intimacy.
Yes,
Mhm.
intimacy is made up of all of these other pieces. All of these other parts are foundational
Mm.
to our relationship with intimacy. And, if I was to add one other thing onto that, I would say practice and learn how to communicate. We take for granted that because we know how to speak to each other, that we know how to communicate with each other, and we simply do not. Even people who are super stellar communicators in the boardroom
Yeah.
can really lack the capacity to communicate inside of the bedroom.
Mm.
And so don't start with the most fraught, most difficult, most vulnerable conversations around
Yeah.
sex and sexuality.
Yeah.
Start with the stuff that is easier, the low-hanging fruit, the things that you know that you need to say or communicate
Give us
about.
an example,
Um,
because I think men have trouble with this.
yeah, I think
Like, and women too, to a certain extent, around this particular topic. Like, how do you enter this conversation?
yeah, I think one area that both sides struggle with there is
Mm.
communicating around desires.
Mm.
Right.
Mhm.
We often don't know for women what we want in bed and intimacy, right? And then we certainly don't know how to speak to what it is that we want, right? So we have this like layering of issues there. And men also have sometimes quite a bit of shame around their desires. Like
Mm.
you're not allowed to want that from your wife. You're not
Right.
allowed to have those thoughts, even though you do, and you watch them on your phone at night in the bathroom when no one's
Yeah.
looking, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to communicate around our desires outside of the bedroom for both of us really benefits our ability to communicate about them in the bedroom.
Mm.
The issue is that many of us, myself included, can be very detached from our desires, right? Like, what is it that you want to do tonight, this weekend? Where do you want to go to dinner? Like, these are really small, really
Mhm.
easy to practice areas where we can discuss what our desires really are. What is it that we want from this season of our life, from the
Mm.
rest of this year?
Yeah.
A lot of us, just the same way like we're afraid to learn that we're pre-diabetic, we're afraid to set goals for ourselves.
Yeah.
We're afraid to be ambitious in other areas of our life. I begin each year with like a pretty robust goal setting and
Yeah.
mind mapping
Yeah. Me
process
too.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And
I do
look at
too.
and this is part of where
Yeah.
we are, right?
Right.
And one of the desires that I had that I was like almost like nervous to say out loud is like I wanted to host more dinner parties.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Getting clear on that desire and just naming it. I've had more folks over for dinner, and it's April when we're
Uh-huh.
recording this, than I did probably like all of last year.
Oh,
It was just
wow.
getting clear that that desire existed inside of me, and then having the courage to speak it out loud and having the capacity to actually be willing to make it happen. So anything that's coming up in the bedroom, if it's difficulty saying something, if it's difficulty being clear with yourself on something, if it's difficulty communicating your requests or the things that you want to try, like
Yeah.
take those and develop them outside of the bedroom first, and then take the skill set that you have created for yourself and built for yourself, and then bring that into your intimate conversations.
Such good information. Are there places couples can go or men can go even to help them communicate? I feel like that's such a thing, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. The place where I actually went to learn a lot of this, and they take a ton of flack. So if you've already have your thoughts about this, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you take what works, leave the
Right.
rest. But I actually did a lot of work with Landmark
Okay.
Worldwide Personal Development. Are you
Okay.
familiar with
No.
them? So they exist all over the country. They have in-person events in major cities, and they do online events. But they do like a 3-day live event called the Forum. It's very confrontational for a lot of folks. Again, they've taken a lot of flack. A lot of people have really strong feelings about them.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily plugging them. I'm just saying that it did work for me. I
Okay.
did Landmark early on in life when I think it was in my mid-20s, and it was confronting, but it caused me to get clear on, and I was already a pretty good communicator, to be
Yeah.
fair. Caused me to get clear where I was lacking integrity, where I would say one thing and then do another. Caused me to get clear on the ways that I had considerations for other people, like, oh, I can't say that because that might hurt them, or that might bring something up, or I shouldn't say that because they're going, instead of
Right.
like just honoring that, like, someone needed to say something
Right.
about
Right.
this relationship and where we had gotten to in
Right.
it. So that was really impactful for me. But there are some phenomenal books and resources if that's not where you want to start. Nonviolent communication. There's even books that come out of more business and leadership around honest communication that could be beneficial and that you can bring into your relationship. And then finding a couples coach if you're more, if you're in a good place and you just want to move forward and be better, or a therapist if you're not in a great place and you really need to do some deeper work that is especially skilled at helping folks navigate communication, because those people are trained to be the third person in the room who can say, okay, like, pause, we're getting heated. Here's what she's trying to say. Here's what he's trying to say. Are you able to get that? Are you able to receive that? Are you able to communicate to them what you got from that? Sometimes when it's very difficult to move through communication differences, having a third party who is neutral, who's paid to be there, can be the thing that makes all the difference.
So, in your opinion, with this work for both men and women, can marriages last more than 20 years?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I think with all things that we just have to treat it like it is we have to treat it like we treat anything else that we want to hold on to in the long term, whether that is our health, our home, our children,
Hmm.
right? If we
Nurture it,
expect that,
grow it.
yeah,
Yeah.
don't just expect that it will take care of you forever if you don't take care of it first.
I love that. Well, this has been so enlightening, and I hope both men and women are able to take from this, and really find a way to communicate and to really reestablish intimacy if they've lost it, or if they're in a great place. Like, what are the things to look out for? So I think this has been incredible. Where would you lead anyone listening or watching today? Is there a resource that you would point them towards, or where can they find you if
Yeah.
they want to work with you?
So I wrote a book that is essentially like my coaching
Okay.
methodology for men in
Okay.
sex and relationships. And it's
Okay.
called Harder, Better, Longer, Stronger: The Science, Skills, and Secrets for the Best Sex of Your Life.
Okay.
You can get that wherever books are sold. And if books are not necessarily your favorite mode of gathering information, then I have over 1,000 videos uploaded to YouTube
Wow.
under my name, Caitlin V,
Okay.
spanning sexuality, spanning relationships. There's videos on there also for women.
Right.
And that is also a great place to start. And in my channel, I also point regularly to the resources that I'm learning from, and I try to share those things as much as possible as well.
Incredible. Well, I've so enjoyed this
Oh,
conversation. I've got to ask what?
I forgot I have a TV show
Oh
that
my
I should
God.
point people to also.
And by the
Little
way,
thing
oh,
called
by
my
the way,
little TV show that I did. It's called Good Sex. It's on
Okay.
HBO Max, and
Okay.
in it we actually put cameras in the bedrooms of
Oh my
several
gosh.
different couples.
Yeah.
And because it is all me working with couples, and each episode and each session shares a lot of tools and actual techniques that you might
Ooh.
want to borrow, and it's
Yeah.
a phenomenal resource to watch with your significant other. So you can watch it, you can
Interesting.
pause it, you can talk about it, you can
Yeah.
try some of the tools.
Yeah.
You can kind of like piece together the exercises that I'm
Yeah.
doing and try them at home.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a pretty
That's a
significant tool
significant tool. So
that you
Good
have
Sex
access
on
to.
HBO
On HBO
Max.
Max, that's right.
And I saw that sex was spelled
Oh,
SEGG.
just to get away from the
Yeah.
algorithm police.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay,
it's
got
just
it.
spelled regular
Okay.
SEX on HBO
On
Max because
HBO
it is
Max. Okay.
HBO,
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. Excellent. All right. Final question. What makes you whole?
Mm. This is on my mind a lot. Having a community around me for whom I can go to for anything
Mm,
is the thing that makes me whole.
I love that. I love that. Well, this has been incredible. If you've been watching and listening, hopefully you've learned something from this episode or you'll share it with someone, maybe a man in your life who really needs to hear this. I think I work with men, I meet a lot of men, I'm married, I have a son, and communication continues to be an area of vulnerability, which then I think leads them down roads maybe they didn't expect. So share it with somebody that you love. And remember, we post new episodes every week. So subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
Before you go, remember healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments. If today's episode gave you one of those moments, subscribe and keep learning with me. The next video is right here and it picks up right where this one left off.